Imagine stepping into like a dimly lit jazz club back in the 1910s.
So setting the scene right away.
Right. So the trumpeter up on stage, he doesn't have a salary. He definitely doesn't have a pension or, paid time off.
Just whatever he makes that night, right?
Exactly. He has tonight's performance, what he and his bandmates are calling a gig. There's literally no guarantee he's playing tomorrow.
Right. It's just a pure one-night transactional deal.
Yeah, and for a century, that word was like almost entirely reserved for musicians and artists. It was the bohemian exception to the whole steady corporate paycheck thing.
But not anymore.
No, not at all. If you are listening to this right now, whether you're a seasoned freelancer grinding out contracts, or maybe a corporate employee quietly eyeing a side hustle.
Or just someone trying to future-proof your career.
Yeah, exactly. That jazz musician's reality is now the global baseline. So today's deep dive is all about the gig economy in 2026.
And we have some incredible data to go through today.
We really do. We're pulling from this massive, incredibly detailed report. It's titled Future of Work: The Gig Economy, Reshaping Careers and Lifestyles Across the Globe.
Yeah, and it's just a remarkable piece of research. I mean, it moves way past the surface level trends.
Right. We're not just talking about ride sharing anymore.
Exactly. We are looking at hard data tracking everything from like the multi-billion-dollar valuations of these platforms all the way down to the hidden psychological toll placed on the actual workers powering them.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really parse out what this systemic shift actually means for you. Like, is this accelerating move toward gig work the ultimate liberation from the 9-to-5 office grind?
Or are we just walking straight into a precarious trap?
Yeah. And most importantly, how do you navigate this new normal without getting, chewed up by the system?
Okay, let's unpack this, because we really need to start by grounding ourselves in the sheer, overwhelming scale of this phenomenon. The scale is honestly what makes this impossible to ignore. Like, as of 2025, the data reveals approximately 1.57 billion people worldwide work as freelancers or independent contractors.
Wait, 1.57 billion? That's with a B.
With a B, yeah. If you look at the person sitting next to you on the train or across from you in a cafe right now, statistically, one of you is participating in this ecosystem.
That is insane. That's nearly 47% of the entire global workforce.
Yeah.
Almost 1 out of every 2 working people on the planet.
Right. And to put a financial metric on that, we are looking at a gig ecosystem valued globally at roughly $570 billion.
Mind-blowing.
What's fascinating here is how this scale represents a fundamental rewiring of how human labor is actually deployed. I mean, this sector grew over 45% in just the past 5 years.
Right. I mean, naturally, the pandemic was a massive accelerant there, forcing all this remote infrastructure overnight.
Absolutely. But it's also deeply demographic. About 55% of global gig workers are under the age of 35.
So it's basically millennials and Gen Z dominating the space.
Exactly. And it makes sense, right? Because they entered the workforce during a period of just perpetual economic and systemic shocks.
Right. They never had the illusion of stability to begin with.
Right. So they inherently lean toward these digital-first, decentralized models. And Visa's data actually paints a very clear picture of the stakes here.
Oh, yeah, I saw this part.
Yeah, 2/3 of app-enabled gig workers rely on this as their primary source of income.
Wow. 2/3.
Yeah, this isn't just extra pocket money for the weekend. It is their actual livelihood.
Thinking about how we even got here, I feel like the traditional 9-to-5 is operating a lot like legacy cable TV.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like cable is this massive, rigid, pre-packaged bundle. You get the desk, the HR department, the steady paycheck, the subsidized health insurance.
But in exchange, you are totally locked in.
Exactly. You're locked into their schedule, their office politics, and their corporate programming. Whereas the gig economy operates exactly like streaming services. It's unbundled, highly fragmented, and totally on demand.
The streaming analogy works perfectly when you look at the mechanics, but I think we have to take it a step further.
How so?
Well, streaming platforms don't just passively offer you content, right? They actively use algorithms to track your watch time, analyze your preferences, and optimize what you see to keep you engaged.
Right. The algorithm is always watching.
Yeah, but in the gig economy, the platform is optimizing you. The worker essentially becomes the product.
Oh, wow. Yeah, which really brings up the fundamental tension of this whole ecosystem, because with 1.57 billion people logging in, we have to examine the dual nature of this work.
Yeah, the two faces of the gig economy.
Right. Because the report illustrates two drastically different realities. On one hand, you have this massive, highly marketed promise of autonomy.
Which is very real for some people.
It is. I mean, 70% of surveyed freelancers chose this path specifically for flexibility and a better work-life balance.
And the appeal there is totally undeniable. I mean, you have, say, a university student in Hanoi funding their degree through asynchronous graphic design projects.
Or like a parent in London who only accepts data entry contracts between school drop-offs and pickups.
Exactly. And it also introduces this structural resilience through income diversification. 50% of gig workers are actually operating on multiple platforms simultaneously.
Which is smart. If one client slashes their budget, you still have 3 others. You aren't tethered to a single CEO's decision to suddenly downsize a department.
Right. You're spreading the risk.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second. Are we just taking profound financial precarity and slapping a trendy freedom filter on it?
That is the big question.
Because the other half of this data is deeply concerning. The report indicates 32% of gig workers struggle to pay their basic monthly bills.
Right, compared to just 18% of traditional employees.
Exactly. And a massive 45% cannot cover a $400 emergency expense without taking on debt.
It's a very precarious spot to be in.
They are operating in a total void of traditional safety nets. No paid sick leave, no employer-sponsored health care, no retirement matching. It's all on them.
And that financial void is the harsh reality for millions. Plus, the psychological weight of it is actually measurable.
Yeah, the mental health stats were rough.
Really rough. The research shows gig workers face 50% higher rates of poor health and psychological distress compared to salaried workers.
50% higher, that's huge.
It is. And the main mechanism driving that distress is a concept known as algorithmic management.
Algorithmic management. So instead of a human manager you can argue with or explain things to, you are just fighting lines of code that dictate your value.
Precisely. I mean, think about it. In a traditional environment, if your pay is docked or a client complains, there's a human chain of command.
Right, you can talk to someone, give context to a supervisor.
Exactly. But in the gig economy, you are managed by opaque, automated systems. They assign your tasks. They set highly dynamic pay rates based on real-time supply and demand.
Which can change by the minute.
Right. And they evaluate your performance through pure data metrics. These algorithms are essentially designed to commoditize your labor.
So you're just a data point.
Yeah. A worker might wake up, open an app, and just find their account completely deactivated. Or maybe their hourly earning potential is suddenly slashed by 20% just due to some change in the platform's back-end logic.
And there's literally no HR department to appeal to.
None. The psychological toll of that kind of total autonomy is profound isolation. You are bearing all the risk of a business, but without any of the actual control.
Man, it's just this hyper-optimized feast or famine cycle, completely dictated by a black box.
Yeah.
So if the system is inherently designed to squeeze margins and isolate workers, how are people actually building wealth in it? Because the report does detail individuals who are absolutely thriving.
They are.
We have to look at how people outsmart these algorithms, right? How they bridge that gap between systemic flaws and individual agency.
The success stories in the data are so crucial because they act as blueprints.
Yeah.
They show us the specific mechanics of thriving rather than just, surviving day to day.
Okay, let's talk about some of these blueprints, like Derek Morgan Jr.
Yes. Derek Morgan Jr. He's a 34-year-old attorney based in Indianapolis.
So what's his story?
Well, during the pandemic lockdowns, the billable hours at his traditional law firm completely dried up. He was just sitting there. But then he did a quick favor for a relative, just filing a standard trademark, and realized he could list that highly specific legal service on Fiverr.
And his trajectory is just incredible. Month 1, he brings in $180.
Not bad for a side gig.
Right. But then month 4, he crosses the $10,000 mark.
Wow.
Yeah. And he eventually resigns from his law firm entirely and builds a $500,000 a year business just processing trademarks. He pays himself a $350,000 personal salary.
That is serious income. But it's his workflow that makes this brilliant. He isn't just sitting there typing out every single document by hand.
Right. He'd burn out immediately.
Exactly. He utilizes an AI assistant to generate the routine boilerplate drafts. He employs a freelance paralegal to handle all the client intake forms. And he reserves his own time exclusively for the high-value legal review.
He took his specialized knowledge and turned it into a scalable product.
He completely decoupled his income from his raw hours.
That's the dream.
Yeah. Then you look at Utkarsh Amitabh. He's an entrepreneur utilizing a platform called Micro One. He secures an extra $312,000, which is roughly 2.6 crore rupees, working a mere 3.5 hours a night.
Okay, wait. Right after his 1-year-old baby goes to sleep, right?
Yep, night shift.
But we should probably clarify what he's actually doing, because training AI models sounds a bit abstract. Like, why is a platform paying someone that kind of premium?
It's because large language models have cognitive blind spots. They hallucinate or they fail at complex multi-step logic.
They confidently tell you the wrong answer.
Exactly. So Utkarsh isn't just like typing casual questions into a prompt box. He possesses highly specialized analytical skills. He is throwing complex edge case business scenarios at the AI to find the exact moment the machine's logic breaks down.
Oh, he's basically breaking it on purpose.
Yes. And then he reframes the prompts to teach the algorithm how to properly process that nuance. He is essentially translating human business logic into machine rules.
And because that solves a massive bottleneck for the AI developers, he commands top-of-the-market rates.
Precisely.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about Padmanabhan Ebbas down in Bengaluru.
Oh, this story is amazing.
It really is. So this is a tech professional with 19 years of experience. We were talking high-level full-stack development, meaning, he builds both the front-end user interface that you click on and the complex back-end servers that make it run.
He also does machine learning.
Yeah.
Very high-level stuff.
Yeah. Yet every single evening, he moonlights delivering food for Swiggy.
And he is certainly not doing it for the delivery wage.
Not at all. He accepts food delivery orders specifically to bypass the brutal corporate B2B sales cycle.
Which is so smart.
Because B2B networking is full of gatekeepers, right? Receptionists, automated email filters, middle managers who just say no.
It takes months to get a meeting.
Exactly. So Padmanabhan prints out high-quality flyers advertising his bespoke software development business, and he physically hands them to the customer along with their dinner.
I love that.
He is literally using a heavily gamified low-wage delivery app as a physical Trojan horse to place his pitch directly into the hands of end consumers.
It is an absolute hack of the physical infrastructure. It's brilliant. And if we extract the core mechanics from these three individuals, two vital principles emerge.
What are they?
First, highly specialized skills command premium rates. They are not competing in the race to the bottom hourly wage markets on these platforms. They are selling specific high-leverage outcomes.
Right. They aren't just selling their time.
Exactly. And second, they treat the gig platform not as a boss, but as a laboratory. They use it to test market demand, build proprietary client lists, and experiment with scale.
Which naturally leads into these survival tactics outlined in the report. Because if someone listening wants to build their own laboratory, the foundational advice goes way beyond just, clipping coupons.
Oh, way beyond. It starts with asymmetric risk management.
Specifically, mastering your cash flow. The baseline rule the report highlights is building an emergency fund covering 6 to 12 months of minimal living expenses.
Not 3 months. 6 to 12.
6 to 12. That feels like a lot, but I guess it's necessary.
That expanded runway is totally mandatory because algorithmic shadow banning or sudden macroeconomic shifts, they're completely unpredictable. You could lose your income overnight.
Right. And financial strategists like Shruti Jain advise keeping 3 to 4 months of that fund in instantly liquid, accessible accounts,
while laddering the remainder in short-term deposits. That way it generates some yield, but remains relatively accessible if things go south.
Okay, then there's this psychological tactic of the self-salary, which I found fascinating.
It's crucial for mental health.
Right. So when you have a massive $10,000 month, the natural impulse is to elevate your lifestyle. Buy a new car, whatever. Instead, you pay yourself a strict, predetermined baseline. Let's say $4,000. The remaining $6,000 goes directly into a surplus business account.
And that's your buffer.
Exactly. When the inevitable dry month hits and you only bring in, say, $2,000, you draw the difference from the surplus. You are artificially simulating the psychological stability of a corporate paycheck to prevent emotional burnout.
You also have to aggressively account for the invisible costs. Setting aside 25 to 30% of every payment for taxes is non-negotiable.
Don't mess with the tax agencies?
Definitely not.
Okay.
Furthermore, as Forbes contributor Robin Schulman highlights in the data, the ultimate goal is transitioning from one-off tasks to ongoing retainers.
Because constantly pitching for new work consumes massive amounts of unbillable time.
It's exhausting. Retainers buy you the strategic breathing room to actually decline toxic clients or, low-paying projects.
So you essentially have to operate yourself as a sovereign corporation.
Pretty much.
But, individual hustle and clever accounting only go so far when the macro environment shifts. And we are watching the gig economy crash headfirst into the broader remote work movement right now. The system is adapting.
We are definitely witnessing a fundamental remote convergence. The report highlights that 63% of employees globally would accept a pay cut in exchange for greater remote work flexibility.
Let's just process that for a second. Nearly 2/3 of the workforce value location independence more than their current salary peak.
People want their lives back. And additionally, a 2025 Cisco study reveals that 73% of employees report feeling significantly more productive in a flexible model.
But the friction really comes from the top down because the same data shows 88% of employers are still demanding return to office metrics.
Which is a huge disconnect.
It is. So if a massive majority of the talent pool is willing to surrender capital just to avoid a commute, aren't traditional corporations going to be forced to adopt gig-style, unbundled flexibility just to stop the talent bleed?
Well, that tension is exactly why global governments are intervening at an unprecedented scale right now. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are moving from an era of workers quietly hacking algorithms to an era of systemic legal reclassification. Lawmakers realize the old binary definitions of employee versus independent contractor are entirely broken.
And real quick, just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, we are completely impartial on this deep dive. We don't take political sides here. We're strictly just reporting on the regulatory shifts that are outlined in the source data.
Exactly. We're just looking at the legal facts.
Right. So let's look at the mechanics of this regulatory wave because it fundamentally alters how platforms can operate. In the European Union, the Platform Workers Directive takes full effect in December 2026.
That's a massive shift.
It introduces a legal presumption of employment. This means if an app controls your rates or your schedule, the burden of proof flips. You are legally presumed to be an employee unless the platform can prove otherwise in court.
But the really fascinating part of that directive is the ban on automated emotional monitoring.
Yes. This targets the darkest aspects of algorithmic management.
Right. Platforms can no longer use biometric sensors, keystroke tracking, or camera feeds to monitor a worker's emotional state or stress levels just to optimize their task load.
That sounds like science fiction, but it was happening.
Oh, it was happening.
Yeah.
And they are now legally barred from processing private conversational data through AI to evaluate performance. It introduces a massive firewall between human dignity and algorithmic optimization.
And it's not just Europe. Malaysia is implementing the Gig Workers Act of 2025, which becomes effective in March 2026.
And what does that entail?
Well, they are establishing a dedicated gig workers tribunal to bypass slow, expensive civil courts. This allows workers to resolve disputes over, algorithmic deactivations rapidly.
It's huge for the workers.
Yeah, and they are also legally mandating front-end earnings transparency, so the worker knows the exact algorithmic payout before they even accept the labor.
Transparency is key. Similarly, India enacted 4 consolidated labor codes in November 2025, attempting to place millions of decentralized workers under a federal regulatory umbrella. And states like Rajasthan and Karnataka are building out specific gig worker welfare boards.
What about the U.S.?
In the United States, alongside the Department of Labor's new contractor rules, the House actually passed collective bargaining legislation in late 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. And what all of this legislation points toward globally is the scaling of the portable benefits movement.
The portable benefits movement, how does that actually function in practice?
So instead of a healthcare plan or a 401k being locked inside a specific corporation, the benefits are attached to a digital wallet owned by the worker.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, every time you complete a gig, whether it's a 2-hour delivery for Swiggy or a 3-month coding contract for a tech firm, the platform pays a fractional percentage into that centralized fund.
So the safety net follows the worker seamlessly across the entire fragmented economy.
Exactly. It represents a structural middle ground between the totally unprotected precarity of the old gig model and the rigid confinement of a traditional W-2 job.
So what does this all mean for the horizon? If we project these trends out to 2035, the Wild West era of unregulated, algorithm-driven exploitation seems to be closing. What defines the next decade?
The defining variable, without a doubt, is the integration of artificial intelligence. It operates as both a massive threat to routine cognitive labor and a profound force multiplier.
Right, like Derek Morgan Jr.
Exactly. Fiverr's internal data actually shows that freelancers who heavily integrate AI tools into their workflows save an average of 8 hours per week.
A whole workday.
Yeah, if you master AI orchestration, you effectively grant yourself an extra working day every single week to scale your client base.
And we are also seeing the platforms themselves mature, right? They are no longer just these digital bulletin boards for cheap logos.
No, they are evolving into vertically integrated ecosystems. They provide embedded financial services, AI copilots, and highly secure digital workspaces.
The geographic borders are dissolving entirely. You can have a systems architect sitting in Nairobi, seamlessly integrating with a startup in San Francisco through a niche platform that caters exclusively to enterprise-level engineering.
The future gig economy will essentially be forged in the tension between these three forces: rapidly advancing automation, aggressive new government frameworks, and the rising collective power of workers demanding equitable terms.
It's totally shifting.
It is. The isolation of the early gig economy is slowly being replaced by highly organized, tech-enabled networks.
Pulling all these threads together, the ultimate takeaway from this report is that the mid-century model of lifetime employment with a single corporation, that safe, predictable cable TV package, is in irreversible decline.
It really is.
LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman famously predicted that the traditional 9-to-5 might be completely obsolete within a decade.
That's a bold claim, but the data is tracking right toward it.
Right. And this shift demands that every single one of us becomes an entrepreneur of our own labor. The gig economy will mercilessly punish passivity. You have to continuously upskill your technical leverage, you must ruthlessly diversify your income sources, and you have to aggressively guard your psychological well-being against the machine.
And acknowledging that reality really brings us to a final, slightly philosophical question.
Ooh.
It's something that data implies but doesn't really explicitly answer. If we're rapidly transitioning into a world where your professional life is a fragmented series of one-night gigs and you never technically belong to a single institution, how do we redefine our psychological milestones?
Oh, that's deep.
Right. If there is no defined endpoint, no 40-year anniversary dinner, and no corporate gold watch handed to you by some executive, how do you define the concept of loyalty? And perhaps most importantly, in a landscape of endless decentralized hustle, how will you personally recognize the moment you've actually made it?
Wow. That is exactly the question you need to sit with. Because the Smoky Jazz Club is closed, the gig is entirely digital, but you are still the one who has to step onto the stage and play the tune. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.